Football. The Andy Pollin Show.
We got to go after this with everything we got, thinking they're going to come with everything they got.
I'll start off by saying I'm bored, I'm broke, and I'm back.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630 starts right now.
Political leaders need to stay out of sports disputes. The idiot governor of West Virginia held a news conference yesterday, opened up his mouth, and stupidity flowed. We will get to that in the 10 o'clock hour. Also some good things. Yeah. George Mason, their women's basketball team, is in the NCAA tournament for the first time ever. They've been playing Division I for 44 years. They're in, and they'll be playing Florida State on Saturday night. We'll talk to their coach, Vanessa Blair-Lewis, at 10 o'clock. And if you did not hear Tony's show yesterday, it was the first time where he talked about the death of John Feinstein. And he and Mike Wilbon, who had known him since he was at the Washington Post as a very young man, were quite good yesterday talking about the life of John and the complicated person that he was. I know I spent a lot of time on it myself, but I wanted to play those comments for you. We'll get to those in the 10 o'clock hour as well. You know, the thing about these brackets is, and it's not a huge thing, but these two nights of play-in games, and they can call them what they want. They call them the first four, but you know it's actually 8 teams, so whatever. It just gets in the way. It gets in the way of filling out the brackets. Not that, you know, you need all this time to study and, you know, what their shooting percentages were and who had the most blocks and players you never heard of and all that. You know, you don't really need time to study, but it was just kind of nice that you could take your time filling out the brackets and turn them in before noon on Thursday. And you still can, but the problem with it is they give you these 4 winners of the 4 games they're going to have starting tonight and into tomorrow night. And then, you know, once in a while, these teams will make a run. I think VCU made it to the Final Four one year where they were a play-in team. So it just mucks it all up. And when they go to 76, and it's going to happen, and it could happen next year, when they go to 76, it's only going to get worse. There weren't enough teams when there were 25, and the University of Maryland should have been in 1974. They changed the rules the following year. They had at-large teams. They went to 32. That wasn't enough. They went to 48, which made it more complicated because you had these first-round buys. And then finally in 1985, they made it at 64. That's where they should have stopped. But they couldn't leave well enough alone. They saw some more money on True TV, a couple of more nights of the NCAA tournament. Like, you know, they're saying, what are we potskying around till Thursday when we have the selections on Sunday? Let's do this right away. So this is where we are. Tony and Mike, old school like I am, took a look at this yesterday on PTI, and I am probably in their camp. I'm not quite as old as Tony. I'm the same age as Wilbon. So count me among those who are supporting what they say and looking at the brackets yesterday.
Wilbon, what is right and what is wrong with the tournament bracket?
Tony, I didn't find any. I found one thing wrong. One thing jumped out at me. And I then listened for hours to people mostly rip it, shred it, and that was putting North Carolina, the University of North Carolina, one of the absolute blue bloods, along with UCLA, Kentucky, Indiana at one point. I know Duke people think of that, but it wasn't forever a blue blood. But to put North Carolina in with this record in Quad 1, it's just like, stop it. What are you doing? What is it you're trying to prove here? And people can say, oh, the North Carolina athletic director, no, because you have to recuse yourself. He's not in the room. But they are together for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and lobby time at the hotel, and all kinds of other stuff. And North Carolina shouldn't be in the field, and Indiana should. And if it wants to, you want to make me a homer because I'm a Big Ten guy, make me one. Because Indiana deserved to be in the field more than North Carolina, which just didn't. So that bothered me. But that's the only thing, Tone, that really bothered me. The rest of it,
yeah.
What gets me, and you and I talked about, we didn't talk as much about individual matchups as we will on your podcast. But, Tony, I think there's going to be games that are called upsets that won't be. I think there are 5s and 6s and maybe a couple of 4 seeds that will advance, at least in the first round. Doesn't mean they'll go to the Final Four, but I think there's going to be carnage on Thursday and Friday next week in the men's tournament, and I welcome it. I think that's what makes the tournament fascinating.
All right, so I'll get to the North Carolina thing, and I'll just say this, that I'm amazed that people obsess about the 68th team in the field. My personal opinion is North Carolina could beat 30 teams in the field, so could West Virginia, so could Indiana. I saw North Carolina twice in the last week take Duke right to the end. You know, they could have won at least one of those games, and Duke is overall number 2 seed here, and that's unlike Illinois, a Big Ten school, which is a 6th seed that didn't come within 50 points of Duke. But I'll get off that. And I'll talk about the SEC, because the SEC is the big story here. 14 teams in, the greatest conference in a one-year span ever, people say. So, Mike, to me, if they don't get any teams in a Final Four, that's a disaster. And I believe they're going to have to get 2 in to justify all the hoopla about them. And I thought there's only 2 schools in the conference that aren't in. LSU isn't in, South Carolina isn't in. So I wondered, what is it like on those campuses? Do people want to fire the coach? LSU was 11-3 out of conference. South Carolina was 10-4 out of conference. So maybe the SEC is that good, and that's the narrative of the tournament. How good is the SEC,
It's
right?
That's the big question. And I'm excited to watch that because I'm one of the few skeptics remaining.
Right, you are.
So, and I don't believe, put a 68 team in, put a small school in. Put a small school in. Don't put another big team in that controls its resources
Indiana,
like North Carolina. Well, Indiana, too. But Indiana was better than North Carolina. I know you don't want to admit that because it's a little too far west for you, but North Carolina had a junk season.
I don't care about 68. You know what I want to see?
What?
I want to see St. John's play Arkansas. I want to see Pitino and Calipari on the same court. I want to see that.
Well, that means wins by both teams. You will probably see St. John's win. They've got Omaha in the first round. But Arkansas would have to pull kind of a minor upset. They're a 10, so they're playing 7 seed Kansas. The thing about Kansas is they were preseason number 1. They fell out of the top 25. And look, Calipari in his first season in Arkansas hasn't exactly lit it up. I mean, coming in as a 10 seed when you got the Purdue chicken guy giving him all these millions and millions of dollars to pay players, it's not anything to really puff your chest out about. But he will see that if both teams, both Arkansas and St. John's, win their first round games. Now, the Pitino story is really amazing. In an era where guys his age are checking out because they don't want to do the whole NIL thing and all that, he's thriving, and he's brought back a program from the dead. I mean, it's been 40 years since St. John's was in the Final Four, and that's when you had Chris Mullin and Walter Berry, 2 of the best players in the country. On top of that, the Big East had really benefited from the birth of ESPN. People forget this. ESPN started in 1979. By a year or 2 in, they were fully invested in the Big East. Dave Gavitt was a brilliant, brilliant man. He was the commissioner of the Big East. He made the deal with ESPN, and they were putting their games on all the time, and they were getting players from, like, California who are coming home from school and seeing these 7:30 tip-offs in the Big East at 4:30 in the afternoon. So the Big East was the place to play. These kids had grown up watching this on TV. They were familiar with these programs, and Gavitt made sure that they all played in pro arenas. I mean, he really understood the whole picture, and they were able to take advantage of that. It's been a long time since that was the case, and now everybody's on TV all the time, and it doesn't matter as much. What you have with Rick Pitino, though, is a guy who took a program that nobody cared about. And believe me, I've been in New York. I worked there for 5 years. It's a pro town. And if the college basketball team isn't Final Four caliber like St. John's was 40 years ago, nobody cares. But he's made them relevant again, and he's won in a way that nobody's done since Louis Carnesecca was in his prime back in the 80s, back in the days of battling John Thompson and the sweater game, the whole thing. And this was Seth Greenberg, who now is with ESPN, coached a long time in college basketball, last stop Virginia Tech, and has coached against Pitino a number of times on the Dan Patrick Show yesterday on what the secret sauce is for Pitino.
He's a savant. He takes his team and beats you, and he takes your team and beats you. I mean, he's a savant. He is unrelenting in terms of the standard that he sets. He gets total buy-in from his guys. He gets winning players and tough guys. But in the end, the guy has a gift. Even despite the white suit, he has a gift. I mean, what he does, whether it's at Boston University, at Providence, with the Knicks, with Louisville, with Kentucky, now with St. John's, he basically gets guys to play in a manner where they all buy into being winning players. They all buy into one thing, the good of the group. What he's done with Kadari Richmond, getting him to play every play, a 6'6" point guard, which makes them really hard to play against. Or RJ Lewis, who started at UMass, who's a shot maker and a scorer, and making him and getting him to buy in what it takes to be successful. Like, he gets those guys to buy in to the greater good. He gets those guys to buy in to competing at a level they didn't think. Now, this time he's doing it with big 6'6" guards. You know, he also did it with Russ Smith and Peyton Siva. He also did it with Billy Donovan. He also did it with Mashburn. So he's just got a gift, and he's in the perfect place because New York guy in New York, selling out Madison Square Garden, having the run he had the year that Coach Carnesecca passes, understanding the history and the tradition of St. John's, embracing all that. This was a long time coming because I personally, the last time the job opened up, I probably would have said, you know, he's had some issues, but Rick Pitino is New York basketball.
And the other thing about that is the issues aren't issues anymore. And it's ramped up so quickly. Remember this? That when they got rid of Mark Turgeon at Maryland 3 years ago, Pitino's name came up before they hired Kevin Willard. And while most agreed that he would make you a winner instantly, as he pretty much has with St. John's, this is their second year and they're a 2 seed, there were people who said, well, yeah, but, you know, there's the icky factor with him. The icky factor's not there anymore. Imagine that. Completely disappearing in 3 years. Not that Kevin Willard was a bad hire, and they're reportedly working on a deal to make him one of the highest paid coaches in college basketball because Villanova's flirting with him and maybe Virginia. So they want to keep him. But Rick Pitino, viewed in, 2021 or 2022 is a lot different than Rick Pitino viewed in 2025, right? I mean, those issues don't matter anymore. Whatever he was doing, how much money under the table he was paying, how many times he looked the other way when there were these recruiting parties, so to speak. So the ick factor just disappeared from him, and now he is the beloved New Yorker who has restored the glory of St. John's basketball, as he has and should get credit for. But it just tells you the way that college basketball has transformed in a very, very short period of time. Oh, no, can't touch Rick Pitino. He's dirty. He's icky. Oh, he's won, but, yeah, look at the way he's won. Now, it doesn't matter, you know, and supposedly is hooked up with the billionaire who owns Vitamin Water, and he's got a blank check to bring in players. I mean, it's not like he's brought in guys either that, you know, were the coveted by everybody. They're players who he identified who could play for him in his style. And once again, he's winning. One more from Seth Greenberg from yesterday from Dan Patrick. And this is how the college game has transformed in his mind. It's much less like the NBA and much more like the game we see played in Europe.
Yeah, we've turned into a European game, the college game. A lot of coaches are running a lot of 5 out. They're running not as much just pure ball screen. It's more ball and people movement. You know, like everyone, my thing about the NBA is NBA players take bad shots and make them. College players take good shots and miss them. So, like, the coach has to have a little bit more control. You know, who you get shot from, where you get shot from, when you get the shot from. And that's why I like Auburn, even though they're struggling now. Bruce Pearl does a great job of getting his guys where they want their shots to come from, which is important. So, yeah, a lot of people disagree with me. I don't think we should go to a 24-second clock. I do think we could advance the ball at the end of games. I think that would be good because we'd have more exciting finishes. I think we should go to quarters. That's fine. I don't think we should move the 3-point line back. Our game is different. Our game is different. You know what? And we try to be the NBA. We're not going to be the NBA. You know, the chance to get the upset in the NCAA tournament is because of our rules. Like, we would have never, when I was at Virginia Tech, beaten Duke in North Carolina, or when we beat Kansas when we were at Long Beach State. We would have never had those wins if there was a 24-second clock, if the rules were the way it is. Now, the one thing I am worried about in the NCAA tournament, especially for the SEC, is The SEC, 14 teams in the tournament. I think they can get 3 in the Final Four potentially, which is the first time since the Big East did it. But it's been such a physical league. I do worry the first 2 rounds when they call it a little tighter, and this league is so physical and handsy, if that's going to impact outcomes of games because they're going to get a bunch of teams in foul trouble.
Seth Greenberg on the Dan Patrick Show. Does that influence you now on how you do your brackets if you haven't already done them? SEC teams may get in foul trouble. Who knows? Hard to tell, So I've seen Maryland games this year where they call it ultra tight, and I've seen it where they let them play. And who knows how this is going to work out. But the one good thing I think that Maryland has going for them going into this tournament is the timeouts are longer. The breaks are like 4 minutes, and that means you shorten your rotation. And, like 95% of their scoring comes from the starting 5. And so while you will see, Geronimo come in and maybe a couple of other players here and there, it'll be mainly the starting 5, which they have relied on pretty much all year. Coming up, Kevin Willard on that, and also a very interesting story that I didn't know about how Georgetown really made a run at Derik Queen and who they used to try and make that run. We'll get to that more as we continue. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630, the sports capital.
All right, coming up in the next hour, we will take a look at the women's tournament as well. Vanessa Blair-Lewis, who's the coach at George Mason, will join us. They're in for the first time in school history, 44 years playing Division I basketball, in for the first time. Kevin Willard back in the NCAA tournament after missing last year, making the rounds as they get ready to play Grand Canyon on Friday in Seattle. And he was yesterday on the CBS show, and it's hosted, among others, John Rothstein, who's kind of an insider in college basketball, and Roy Hibbert, the former Georgetown center, played a long time in the NBA as well, part of a Final Four team that Georgetown had in 2007. I want you to listen for a question that he asked Willard. That's not the first one. The first one is they dive right into it. The matchup against Grand Canyon, a team that he hadn't had a chance to see much of on tape when he had his news conference on Sunday night. After diving into the tape, here's his scouting report.
Bryce Drew is one of the best coaches in this country. I mean, this is the 3rd year in a row he's gone. He's got a great group. They're talented. They got big guys inside that can score. Their guards are dynamic. They post you up. They can go off the dribble. But I just think the fact that he's been there 3 years in a row just shows you how good a coach Bryce is.
Hey, Coach, I want to talk about your freshman of the year, Derik Queen. He is great. Actually, Georgetown brought me in when he took an unofficial visit. They thought I could be the juice to help get him there, but you obviously got him. When I watch him play, he's around the free throw line. He's very silky smooth, plays like a little bit like a DeMarcus Cousins. I feel like you give him a little bit more of a leash as a freshman. Can you talk about his development in his rookie year? His freshman year, sorry.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, Roy, there was no way he was going to Georgetown. Like, you wasted your time. I'm not letting a Baltimore kid go to Georgetown, man. Baltimore kids are staying in Maryland. No, I mean, I think what makes Derik so unique is the fact that he has an old school feel to the way he plays basketball. He just has a great, he knows when he's got a smaller guy on him, he can go down low and post up. He knows when he's got a bigger guy and we can take him off the dribble. He has been, he's worked really hard at his body. And I think the biggest thing, he loves the game of basketball. He's a great teammate. And it's been such a pleasure to coach him, even though I'm not going to coach him much longer because I'm going to be watching him hopefully with the Wizards.
Kevin, you guys made so many changes to your roster after last season through the transfer portal. You knew you were adding Derik Queen. What was the specific plan, though, in terms of acquiring personnel when you finished last season?
Yeah, I mean, I think the big thing, John, is, we knew we had Julian Reese is one of the most under-talked about guys in college basketball, and I knew I had Julian and Derik. So the big thing for us was let's get guys around him that can make shots, that shoot the basketball over 40% off catch-and-shoot threes. And, Rodney Rice, Jacoby Gillespie, and Selton Miguel have been just phenomenal working off the 2 big guys, which sometimes isn't easy, but they've done a great job of understanding how to work with Julian, how to work with Derik. And it really was, building a roster around those 2 big guys.
Hey, Coach, I want to ask about the mental toughness from the coaching perspective and the player's perspective, going from playing East Coast teams like Rutgers to Midwest teams and going all the way to the West Coast playing Oregon in your league. What was the resilience like to go from place to place, and will that actually help you in the tournament with your placement, your seeding?
Yeah, Roy, I mean, I think it's what's great about the Big Ten Conference is we have so many great coaches, great players, but I think the biggest thing is that we see so many different styles of basketball. We've been out west already. We've played out of Oregon, played out Washington. So I'm actually excited about going out west. I think it's a great opportunity for us because we've been out there before. We understand what the time change is all about. So I think once we got kind of used to the different styles, I think these guys really bought into how we had to play. Our defensive toughness and how we wanted to play offensively. So the Big Ten, it's such a good basketball conference, but it gives you a unique ability to play against so many great coaches.
Kevin, 5 years ago in 2020, you had a team at Seton Hall that was good enough to get to the Final Four. It didn't get to play in the NCAA tournament due to COVID. Maryland also in 2020 had a Final Four caliber team. I'm curious, how does this Maryland team this year compare to the 2020 Seton Hall team that you coached?
Yeah, I mean, we're a little bit different in the fact that I think my starting five at that year was a little bit more dependent on a little guy that could really shoot the basketball from just about anywhere and wasn't afraid to shoot it from anywhere. Yep. This team's a little bit more balanced. I think, we can get you from 5 different guys at any given night. I think the other thing, the Seton Hall team had 2 7-footers that were great shot blockers. They weren't necessarily back to the basket buckets, but we could be more aggressive on defense because it was a block party when you went down there. So similar in the fact that I love being around this group. They're a great group of guys. They like me. They like each other. In the portal area, I think it's been really fun to be with a bunch of guys that we just brought in that have such a good group that like being around each other.
Coach, with teams and players, we talk about you on Selection Sunday, and then, of course, on our air, we're going to dissect the bracket the next few days, but we don't really hear much from you and your guys until Thursday or Friday when you open. If you could pull back the curtain, what are the next couple of days like for your team in meetings and practice and things like that?
Well, yeah, we actually just got done with our first film session with Grand Canyon, so we've already dove into it a little bit. I think the biggest thing with our guys is just getting our mindset that, we weren't overly happy with the way the season ended. We didn't play overly well against Michigan in the Big Ten semifinals. So to understand that we're going to play against a very experienced team, that we have to practice and get ready. I think that's the big thing with this group is when we practice well, we play well. So over the next couple days, obviously watching film already. They wanted to watch film, so we already watched film tonight. We'll get back after practice, and we'll get out to the West Coast a little bit early, have some team time, and then get ready to play against a very good Grand Canyon team.
That's Kevin Willard, Maryland coach on CBS Sports as they get ready to play in the NCAA tournament. I love that part where Roy Hibbert says that they used him to try and get the juice to bring Derik Queen to Georgetown, and Willard said, you were never going to get a Baltimore kid to Georgetown. It made me laugh thinking about the history because the backbone of that great team, those great teams that John Thompson had, of course, Patrick Ewing, but he also had David Wingate, and he brought in several others from Baltimore. He did a very good job recruiting Baltimore at a time where Maryland was struggling with it. And the reason for it seems ridiculous, but this was apparently the case. Lefty Driesell had a great player named Ernie Graham. I think he still holds the single-game record for most points. I think he had 44 points against NC State. And Ernie Graham, for whatever reason, went back to Baltimore and said to the great players there, Maryland is not the place you want to be. And Lefty had a difficult time recruiting there. Bob Wade comes in. He had that great Dunbar team in Baltimore in over his head as a college coach. Didn't have enough experience to do that, and they ran into all kinds of problems. I don't know how well he did recruiting, but the ice was really broken by Gary Williams 3 or 4 years into his run at Maryland when he got Keith Booth to go there. Joe Smith was the best player in that recruiting class, but he was overlooked for a variety of reasons, including that he played on the same AAU team with Allen Iverson, and Iverson got all the points. But Keith Booth was one of the top recruits in the country. They were trying hard. Rick Pitino wanted to get him badly at Kentucky. And Gary got him to go to Maryland, and that kind of broke the ice for Baltimore. So, Kevin Willard can joke about that. That a Baltimore guy wasn't going to go to Georgetown; he was going to go to Maryland. There was a time when that wasn't the case. And look, all credit to Ed Cooley for trying to get Roy Hibbert, who had a nice NBA career and was part of a Final Four team at Georgetown, to bring in one of the top recruits in the country. But he goes to Maryland, and they're reaping the benefits as they are a 4 seed going into the NCAA tournament. We turn now to the Master of March, Tom Izzo. He's only won one national championship. I say only one. I've been to a bunch of Final Fours, and he's, one of the few old school guys that's still doing it. A lot of them checked out. Roy Williams and Boeheim, of course, they were older. Krzyzewski, many of the guys who you didn't think were ever going to leave left, and they left. And a big reason because of NIL and the other things that were going on in college basketball. But Izzo is still there at Michigan. He's been the head coach since 1985, 40 years of doing this. And he's doing it his way and still getting it done in the month of March, as he was the regular season Big Ten champion and getting ready for another run in the month that he likes best.
I said God put March on the planet for basketball coaches, and it's been good to me. But I think it's a combination of things. Some good players. I think we try to, after the first couple years, year 4, we were in a Final Four. Year 5, we won it. And I kind of learned then that this is the new standard. Nothing else will be accepted. And you got to build towards it, and you don't want to be so good in December and then not very good. You don't want to burn guys out. So we've kind of had a philosophy. And at the same time, I'm the luckiest guy in America. Why Michigan State? From Magic Johnson, Mateen Cleaves, Steve Smith, Draymond Green. I mean, those guys are all calling back now this week and making sure they're threatening our guys, to be very blunt and honest about it. They threaten them. And that works better than the coach doing anything.
Hey, the standard's the standard, okay? We will rip those jerseys off of your backs. You don't show up. I got respect for that. When the alumni buys in, especially whenever you've been around that long, it's easier to sell to the team, I would assume. Go ahead, AJ.
Coach, you mentioned that you like football better than basketball. What is it about football that you love so much? And do you ever, incorporate some kind of football drills, bring the pads in, knock the guys around a little bit at practice?
Hell yeah.
Well, I can tell you the funny story now. You probably heard it, but in 2000, 2001, when we won the national champ, we went to 3 Final Fours, and we went to Ohio State, and we lost the rebound battle for the first time in, I think, 18 games. And I said then, I got back, I told my equipment man, call Saban, tell him I need 12 sets of gear at practice tomorrow. We play a game called the War Game. It's a rebounding drill. So we had practice. I was mad. I brought out the pads. All the players, the 6'9" guys are wondering what the hell is a pad. So Mateen Cleaves was teaching guys how to button their chin straps. He was loving it. I was mad. I wanted it to be a grind drill. They started having so much fun. For 15 minutes, we beat the hell out of each other and nobody got hurt. Now, if I did that today, I'd probably get sued. So I don't do that as much anymore. But that was fun. And you know what? I had Zach Randolph. I had some guys that got after it. Yeah. And that's why we went to 3 straight Final Fours.
Okay, so hold on. I know you can't do the drill now, but let's go back in time. We're on wood with pads, or are we on a wrestling mat? Can you take me through the drill? How's this? Are we just, what are we, Oklahoma drills? What's going on?
Close to Oklahoma drills. I know that one too, but 5 guys line up under the basket, 5 guys at the 3-point line. Boom, we hit each other, and whoever gets the ball gets the ball. And it was all on hardwood. It was a football team on hardwood. It was, somebody called my team that at the Final Four that year. They said, well, that's nothing but a football team on hardwood. And he was right, but it won a national championship, so it wasn't all that bad.
That's Tom Izzo on the Pat McAfee show on ESPN yesterday. And when he said, I called Saban, yeah, it's that guy, Nick Saban, who is coaching at Michigan State. Can you imagine that? In the late 90s, early 2000s, they had the greatest college football coach of all time and one of the 5 best, maybe 10 best college basketball coaches ever in Tom Izzo. Isn't that remarkable? That athletic director did a hell of a job. I couldn't hang on to Saban, but he still got Izzo there. I think I said he started in 85. It was 95. So he's been there 30 years as the head coach. That doesn't happen. That's in the rarefied air of, Wooden and Krzyzewski and people like that. And certainly Tom Izzo is in that conversation. And as I mentioned, still doing it in his 70s. No plans to retire. Wants to come back, likes what he does, and is as much a part of the fabric of Michigan State as anyone. But he's had to adapt. And, coaches who don't adapt don't last, and they check out for a variety of reasons. And Tony Bennett, who's certainly young enough to be a coach for another 10 to 15 years, who's won a national championship at Virginia, said, this is not for me. This is not what I signed up for. He checked out. Whether he coaches again or not, we'll see. But he had enough, and he left Virginia before the season started. This is Izzo on the changes that he's seen and what he's been able to adapt to.
I mean, it has changed, but I use the football term all the time. When things change and you got all these different offenses and defenses, and at the end of the day, you still got to be able to block, tackle, and not turn the ball over. And in basketball, you still got to be able to defend and rebound to win on the road and not turn the ball over. So I think I've changed some, unfortunately. I think I'm getting back to my old self. Your show maybe brings it to fact. You say and do what you want on this. You're not politically correct all the time.
Whoa.
And I would be considered not a politically correct guy all the time. But I think if you spend time with your players, they know you're coaching them to win championships. You want them to be pros. They want to do these things that 1% of the world does, but they think everybody should just be able to do it by patting you on the back and nice job, buddy. You just missed 10 shots in a row. That's great,
Yeah, but remember, the old cliche is they don't care what you know until they know that you care. Like, obviously,
exactly.
Those moments.
On my desk.
Yeah. Oh, really? That's a cliche for a reason, though. Like, what people see on TV at the biggest game, a coach and a player interacting, they don't see the actual hundreds of hours beforehand to get to know that person. Are you a guy that views all of them like your kids? You hear a lot of coaches say that type of thing. Like, I wouldn't let my kids do this, so I'm not going to let my players do this. Is that how your relationship is with the boys on the team? And has it been that way throughout the entirety? Have you had to evolve?
Well, my two kids are now 30 and 25, and unfortunately, I have to admit I spent more time with my players than I did my kids, and that's not always fair. That's the reality of coaching, as I think every football and basketball coach and probably other sports too, but that is the reality of it. I try to bring my family in with my team because you don't get enough family time unless you do that. But hell yeah, you look at them, you want them to be successful. You want them to be great. You want them to win championships. You want them to have a life after basketball. I mean, really our job is to make the next 70 years better than the first 20. It's getting harder to do because holding people accountable and things is, people look at that as illegal nowadays.
That is Tom Izzo, maybe a little philosophy on life as well. He talks about his two kids. I know he had his son on the team as a walk-on, but it is a price that people who achieve greatness pay. There are, it's an old saying that people who achieve greatness rarely have balanced lives, and he may have, in staying in the same place has probably helped him to a great degree. A lot of coaches have to move around. Head coaches, especially assistant coaches. Assistant coaches are tied to the head coach. Head coach loses his job. He may not even go to the next place with that coach if he gets another job. I mean, there's a lot of moving around that has to happen, and the fact he's been able to stay in one place has helped. But, to be as great as he has been as a coach, he's given up family time to spend it with the team, and that's something that these guys all have to deal with. But in terms of what he's done in college basketball, it's hard to match. And as time goes on, I just look at a guy like Kevin Willard, and this year Villanova reportedly wants him, Virginia wants him, who knows, there may be other places that want him as well. Last year, when they didn't make the tournament, there were people going, can we buy him out? Buy him out. Yeah. And that's the nature of the business these days. And if you look at great coaches like Mike Krzyzewski and John Wooden, the two best, I don't think you can make an argument that they aren't. You can put them in any order you want, but Wooden's got 10 championships. Krzyzewski's got 5. Their early years were a struggle. John Wooden, I think, was at UCLA for like 15 years before he won an NCAA championship. Mike Krzyzewski had really bad teams early on at Duke, and the team that turned it around for him was the Jay Bilas, Johnny Dawkins team that made it to the Final Four in the championship game against Louisville in 1986. But they struggled the first 3 years, and had they not had that success in year 4 of that recruiting class, and that wasn't his first one, who knows? Duke maybe turns to somebody else. And to have a run of 30 years as the head coach, of course, he was there for like 15 years as an assistant to Judd Heathcote before that. That's a remarkable thing. But even still, even with all that stability in one place, there's a family price that he obviously paid. So when I look at Alex Ovechkin as he's now chasing the record, which is within reach this year, they've got 15 games left to go. They're starting a 3-game homestand tonight against Detroit. And then of the last 12 games, 8 of them are on the road. So 15 games to get past the record, which he is on pace to do. Here are the numbers. He is on pace at .53 goals a game, a little more than half a goal a game to get the record within 15. That's the number that he needs. His pace is, and this has been remarkable because most people who are coming back from a broken leg like limp for 3 months or so. But he came back after 6 weeks, and his pace is even greater than that. His goal pace is .58 per game. So it's almost .6, a little more, over half a goal a game, and that's the pace that he needs to stay on to break the record before the end of the season. For whatever that's worth. I mean, that could get blown out of the water if he has a hat trick tonight against Detroit. It could happen. He could go into a drought. God forbid he could get injured again. And I've said this, too, that I think it would be good for hockey if he comes up short, because then you got a full off season to talk about it. He's got another year left on his contract. He's indicating that he's not going to sign another one. So he's getting close to retirement. But he is not going to leave before he gets the record. That's for sure. That's obviously something that's important to him and should be. It's important to the organization, and it's important to the game of hockey. And there's a front page story in the Times today written by Liam Griffin outlining what he has done, what lengths he has gone to in the memorabilia game. Now, remember, Pete Rose got this earlier than anybody else. Pete Rose in the record-breaking game where he broke Ty Cobb's record, which was against San Diego in 1985, I believe. Yeah, 1985. He, changed his uniform between every inning, changed his shoes, changed his batting gloves because he wanted to sell all that stuff. Pete was always looking for money because he had a gambling problem. In fact, the day he was banned from baseball for life, he was on QVC that night selling autographed bats. So that's the kind of guy he was, and he got that game. Ovechkin doesn't do that, but I wasn't aware of how far he has gone with the memorabilia. As Liam Griffin writes, what will happen to the record-breaking puck? What about the stick he uses to score the historic goal? Who keeps his game-worn jersey? The Capitals did not comment for this article, but the team has a dedicated Ovechkin display at Capital One Arena. The consensus is that Ovechkin will receive the right of first refusal for the memorabilia. He has been saving these sticks and pucks this season and flashing his gap-toothed smile in photos after games. David Arbutin, Ovechkin's agent, says that likely won't change. It's up to him. When the time comes, he'll decide. He has kept every goal-scoring puck and stick from the past 4 years. Wow. He says, I will put them in a museum, but that's not the Hockey Hall of Fame in Toronto. He's got a long-standing plan to open his collection near his hometown in Moscow. He told NHL.com it would open in 2 years with the stick from goal number 896 as the piece de resistance, the number one thing, the stick there. He says, most of the sticks are over there already. I think it's going to be cool. Representatives from the Hockey Hall of Fame hope to get their hands on some of the artifacts from the record-breaking game. Ovechkin's status as a collector, though, complicates matters. We have had talks with Alex. We have met with him, says Phil Pritchard, the vice president and curator of the Hall of Fame Resource Center. We've talked with the Capitals as well. They're open to helping us in any way they can. Now, I imagine that the price on that, this would be a Darren Ravel subject. He's become like the number one guy on memorabilia. But I would wonder. I'd like people to be able to see it. I wouldn't want to have to necessarily schlep to Moscow to see it. But I think that's something that people, can relate to, the stick and the puck and all that. It's funny, we're talking about the anniversary of the Miracle on Ice, the 45th anniversary, and the game against the Russians. And Michael Ruzioni was on with Rich Eisen, and Eisen said, well, what happened to the puck? And he said, the puck that Ruzioni scored, that what turned out to be the game-winning goal. And he said, things were different then. They just put the puck back in play, and at some point it went over the boards, and somebody got it. But, unless that person, and they didn't do things that way 45 years ago, but nowadays that would have been, well, they wouldn't have put it in play. They would have immediately taken the puck and said, here, put it with the equipment guy, and they'd label it, and, that'd be worth hundreds of thousands of dollars now, I would think. But the guy or woman who caught the puck in the stands at Lake Placid, and it was a very small arena from what I understand, that person got the puck, but how would you prove it? And it wasn't even like they would have like a logo on the pucks in those days. It was just a plain rubber disc. And things were a lot different. So whoever gets that stick, whoever gets that puck, Ovechkin will get it, obviously. They'll return it to him. But whoever might buy it on the market, I don't know if Ovechkin would ever sell it. I would hope that he wouldn't. I would think that it should be something that's in a museum. But that is a remarkable thing. Like, I don't even know if anybody has Gretzky's stick from the when he set the record, when he went past Gordie Howe or the puck or anything like that. People just didn't save stuff. It's like we were stupid when we were kids. We put our cards in the spokes of the bicycle. I mean, I have a Lou Alcindor rookie card, and if it was in mint condition, it would be worth thousands. But I put a piece of tape on it and taped it to my door, and one of the corners is bent, so it is what it is. It's not worth a lot of money. All right, coming up, we'll talk to Vanessa Blair-Lewis. She's got George Mason women's team in the tournament for the first time. And also Tony and Mike with their remembrances of John Feinstein. That and more as we continue. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630. It's fine when politicians dip their toes in the sports waters and they make a bet like on the Super Bowl, and, one politician will offer some food type from the area for the other. That's fine. The governor of West Virginia opens up his mouth and makes an absolute fool of himself about the state's basketball team being left out of the NCAA tournament. That's another thing, and we'll get to that mess coming up. Tony and Mike a little bit later on about the life and times of John Feinstein, who they knew as well as anyone. We will get to all of that coming up. But we're joined now by Vanessa Blair-Lewis, who is the head basketball coach of the women's team at George Mason University. They have been playing basketball, Division I basketball at George Mason for 44 years. This is the first time they are in the NCAA tournament, advancing by winning the A-10 tournament over St. Joe's. And Vanessa, I know you've been coaching a long time, over 20 years, but what does this mean to you to be the first to take George Mason to the NCAA tournament?
Oh, it's just, first of all, thank you for having me on the show. It is exciting. It's what we set out to do when we took the job, being a young lady from the DMV and having an opportunity to come back home to George Mason. We knew it was a daunting task, going from 0 wins the year we came in the conference, and having the audacity to believe big enough to win championships and hang banners. A testament to my staff, a testament to these young ladies who have been very resilient. We hung a banner in our practice facility in my first year that said Future A-10 Champions. And, a lot of people are like, why are you hanging this big banner in here? And I'm like, because sometimes you have to see it to be it. And so every day they come in here, I want them to know this is what our future is. It's not in the past. It's not what we've been. It's what we're trying to become. And so it's very exciting. It's what we planned. It's what we dreamed. Obviously, all things a lot of times have to fall into place for amazing things like this to happen, and the support staff from our administration. And I think we all know administrations win championships long before the coach is hired, because there has to be that level of dedication and support of the program. So I thank my administration, too, for believing big with us.
It's funny you say that about hanging the banner. I assume you know Jim Larinaga, who really put George Mason basketball on the map. and he tells the story of the team that he took to the Final Four. And, it would have been a ridiculous thought at the beginning of the year that George Mason could make the Final Four. But his friend Bob Rotella, who is a sports psychologist, asked his team to dream, and one of the players said, "Our dream is to get to the Final Four." I mean, what you're talking about there is a very similar thing, right? I mean, you'd never made the tournament before, and early on, off a team that wasn't very good, you said, "We're going to make the NCAA tournament."
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. We've done it at two institutions that had never been. The
Yeah.
last institution I was at, Bethune-Cookman, they had never been. And I think it's less a lot of times about, not just having the talent, but you have to have a mindset. Like champions have a mindset. You ever listen to any of Kobe Bryant's interviews or LeBron? There's a mindset that goes along with the talent. Obviously, there has to be that level of talent. But the mindset has to be there. And I remember reading the book Relentless with a couple of my players, and just the mindset that goes into wanting to be a champion, it's different. It is. It almost seems illogical to people on the outside.
Yeah. I read where you were the daughter of a coach. Was your dad a coach of boys or girls in high school in Largo?
Oh, he was the girls' coach, but he's coached everybody. But yeah, he definitely was the girls' coach. I come from a family of basketball players. Adrian Branch, my first cousin, played at Maryland, played for the Lakers. Ted Jeffries, Christy Winter-Scott, a whole legacy in the DMV of just playing basketball. My dad didn't work at the school. He was down at Department of Housing and Urban Development. He worked with the mayor getting housing for people in the city. And so when the janitor didn't want the job, my dad stepped up. And, sometimes back in the day for the women's coach or the girls' basketball, it was just the math teacher or someone who just wanted an extra stipend.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we didn't have anybody step up when the PE teacher that was the coach prior decided to retire. No one the whole summer stepped up to want to coach us, not even the janitor. So my dad said, "I'll do it." And I said, no, please don't do this. Those are my friends. And he started there, but then I graduated and he stayed for 15, 16 more years.
Wow.
Because he felt a physical responsibility to give back to the community and pour into young women. And he's put over 200 women in a position to get scholarship to go further their education.
Of course, you went on to a great career at Mount St. Mary's, and I just wonder, in growing up in that kind of basketball royalty that you talked about, your family and others who played basketball, I guess there weren't a lot of participation trophies, that the expectations were pretty high for you growing up.
Absolutely. I'm the youngest of four, so I knew very early on I was never going to play basketball because I would sit and watch the conversations at the kitchen table after wins, after losses. I would watch the practices. I would watch the early mornings. I'm like, "Where are y'all going at 6 a.m.? We're going to run. Dad's going to take us to the gym." I'm like, I'm doing a whole nother sport. I don't want to have any parts of this. But you're right. The battles on the court, just my sisters and brothers were outside playing, and we're not coming in until we win. And Mom's like, "Dinner's getting cold." And Dad's like, "Nope, I don't care if it starts raining. Somebody's got to win and somebody's got to lose." So you're right. We grew up in a very competitive household. And then, like I said, with my dad as my coach, if we won, I could, get the keys to the car and $1 million. If we lost, I'm answering for everybody's mistake till midnight.
Wow. Looking at your bracket, you get started on Saturday against Florida State. I know coaches don't like to look ahead, but this opportunity that you might have in round two, playing LSU in Baton Rouge, I mean, you got to be thinking. I guess you have to stop yourself from thinking. But when you talk about dreaming big, I mean that's an opportunity that could really put your program on the map.
Oh, absolutely. You can't get past round one. FSU is very formidable under Brooke. She's done a great job taking over for Sue Samurai. We're going to have our hands. We're going to have it cut out for us.
Mm-hmm.
On Saturday. But like you said, should we get by that? Yeah, this is what the madness of March is all about.
Yeah.
You throw out the regular season, you throw out whatever you were before. It's a one-game season. It's one game at a time, and you win and you advance. And I think if you take a group of women into a tournament and you're happy to be there, then you get the happy results. You get the consolation prize and you go back home. But when you take a group of women that believe they should be there, and if they're ready to play and they want to strap up and put their shoes on and go against anybody, I think those are the results that may turn out to be in your favor. And that's how we're going out there. We're not going out there to come back home on Saturday.
There you go. We're talking to George Mason basketball coach, Vanessa Blair-Lewis, who has done a terrific job there getting them to the NCAA tournament. Before I let you go, we talk about your background and playing and how long you've been involved in the sport as a coach. It has taken a giant step forward in the last few years. Do you have the ability to communicate to your players who are young just where this sport used to be, where the coach used to drive the team bus and wash the uniforms, and how they are now in a it's not quite equal to men's basketball, but it's taken a giant leap forward. Do they have an appreciation for that?
I think we are prehistoric to them. When we tell stories about what we used to have, I think it sounds like every parent who's trying to tell their child, when I went to school, I walked 3 miles in the snow. That's, I think, how this comes off to this generation. It's an exciting time. I think for the people who can appreciate it because we've lived in a different environment, it's awe-inspiring. And I think just how the community has embraced women's basketball, especially with, even last year, Iowa and LSU and just all of the women's basketball, Asia Wilson, that have come up, and the attraction to the sport. I'm not so sure it's necessary for them to have to know what it's come from, although you speak about the history, whether they can relate to it or not is not as important as to us to keep growing this game, to keep pouring into these women, to keep giving them the advantages and the resources to compete.
It's been very exciting, very interesting to watch. Best of luck to you down there, and you know what this town was like 19 years ago. It's a long way to go to the Final Four, but as you say, if you can't dream it, it can't happen. So best of luck to you along the way.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you. That's Vanessa Blair-Lewis, who is the basketball coach at George Mason. They're in for the first time in school history. They went to Division I in 1982, and they're finally in the NCAA tournament playing Florida State on Saturday night. All right, back to the men's tournament. And the carping that started right away is, oh, my God, North Carolina got in, West Virginia didn't get in, Indiana didn't get in. Seth Greenberg, who was, it seemed like forever, the bubble coach at Virginia Tech every year. Is they going to get in? Get in? They didn't get in. And that's part of the reason now he's working at ESPN instead of being on the sidelines, but he's done an outstanding job there. And yesterday he was on the Dan Patrick Show and talking about the so-called snub for the other teams because of North Carolina.
I think it's a big deal. I mean, you are your body of work. Your resume is your resume. And, North Carolina, do you get credit for playing good teams? Do you get credit for beating good teams? They're 1-12 against Quad 1. That's a fact. They played a very difficult non-conference schedule. That's a fact. They also lost to Pitt and Wake Forest and Clemson and Louisville. All right, those were opportunities. Not saying those teams aren't good, but those are opportunities that they didn't embrace. They played Michigan State in Hawaii. That was an opportunity before Michigan State became the juggernaut they were. Now, look, playing Auburn and Alabama and Florida, those are the best of the best. But I do think that if you look at their resume, their body of work, their resume says they're not an NCAA tournament team. Having said that, Dan, now that they're in the tournament, they can beat San Diego State. Now that they're in the tournament, they can give Ole Miss a game. But you know what? You don't get a free pass to get in the tournament. You earn your way into the tournament, and everyone should be evaluated across the same set of criteria. And that's probably the thing that kind of bothers me to an extent.
How did it happen then?
How did it happen? Look, Bubba Cunningham is a good man. I have a lot of respect for him. He's the head of the committee. And they say, well, he recuses himself from the room when they're talking about North Carolina. That's great. Breakfast, lunch, and dinner, conversations, committee members that he's chairing who also know they're in that situation. I thought they put Xavier in as well, and I think they put Xavier in and as a kind of another one of those teams that didn't have a ton of Quad 1 wins. But that was a good way to justify putting North Carolina in because their resumes were similar. But look, I'm not pointing a finger at Bubba without a doubt. I'm not doing that. But the system is flawed in this way, Dan. We've got to have a better set criteria so everyone's got their own prism of what how they're looking at these resumes, right? We've got to say this is the most important. This is the second most important. This is the third most important. Instead of having everyone say, well, the prism I looked at this through, like the whole idea that they said, well, West Virginia, DeVries wasn't there at the end of the season. He wasn't there at the beginning of the season. They still won games. I mean, he missed 24 games or so. So, just the excuse after the bracket came out was a little bit weak. Oh, it is what it is. It's over with. Now we're going to have a great NCAA tournament. But, as a guy that sat on the outside looking in for 48 straight months, Dan, not that it still bothers me at all. I feel for those guys because, the tournament is a reward for your season. I feel for the seniors on those teams. I feel for the coaches. The season starts, in the summer. It's a long, grinded out season. And I thought some of those other teams deserved the opportunity ahead of North Carolina.
So that is a reasoned, educated explanation for why some of these teams got left out, including West Virginia. Now for the ignorant look at this. This is the governor of West Virginia, Patrick Morrisey, who seems to have some pretty big fish to fry with the cuts being made by the federal government and one of the poorest states in the nation. I think he probably needs to be concerned about kids getting school lunches and people on Social Security and Medicaid and all the other things that go along with being the governor of the state. But no. What did he do yesterday? He held a news conference and had a banner made up for the podium which said National Corrupt Athletic Association to whine and complain that the state's basketball team was left out of the NCAA tournament and there should be an investigation. This is Patrick Morrisey, the governor of West Virginia.
Everyone had WVU as a shoo-in for the tournament. In fact, leading up to Selection Sunday, 111 out of the 111 bracketologists projected WVU to make the tournament. And for good reason. The selection committee for years has talked about the importance of quad one wins. Now, for those who don't know much about a quad one win, this is when you defeat a team ranked 1st through 75th. Obviously, it depends upon whether you're home, neutral site, or away. Well, West Virginia had 6 quad one wins. And that was combined with an undefeated record against quad 3 and quad 4 opponents. 3 wins against top 10 teams and the 24th toughest schedule in America. West Virginia deserved to be in the NCAA tournament. This was a miscarriage of justice and robbery at the highest levels. Now, who was the last team to get into the tournament? Ahead of the Mountaineers. That would be the University of North Carolina. The Tar Heels went 1-12 in quad 1 games and even had a quad 3 loss. And we keep hearing about the importance of these quad 1 wins, but UNC couldn't even get more than 1. They also had the 5th toughest schedule in America, right behind WVU. Now, here's something you may not know. UNC had representation in the room during the selection process. Let me repeat that. UNC had representation in the room during the selection process. Bubba Cunningham is the athletic director for UNC. He also happens to be the head of the tournament selection committee. Now, it's being reported by a number of outlets that Cunningham had a significant bonus incentive, at least $70,000 to get into the tournament, arguably more if they advanced, with more incentives on the way. And I want folks to let that sink in for just a minute. Of the 111 brackets that were projected pertaining to North Carolina, UNC was only in 27 of them. This stinks at the highest level.
No, it doesn't stink at the highest level. It's not a miscarriage of justice. It's not a robbery. And once again, playing with the facts, Bubba Cunningham is the head of the committee to select the teams, but he recused himself from the room He was not in it when they were discussing North Carolina. Now, you can whine and complain that your team didn't get in, but you have other things to worry about. Just butt out of this and don't turn yourself into Joe Lunardi. How about turning yourself into a responsible governor and deal with real state issues instead of this stupid grandstanding? Now, that's my thoughts on this. Lucky enough to have a former member of the West Virginia basketball program in the studio with me, Isaac Harris. You have much more firsthand knowledge of this situation than I do. What are your thoughts?
My initial thought is I have to disagree with you.
Okay, go ahead.
West Virginia should be in the tournament, not because of my fandom, but given the resume that they pulled off with notable signature wins against beating Kansas in Allen Fieldhouse and also beating the number 1 team in the country at home when they were picked by Vegas to lose, and several other neutral big wins against Gonzaga in a multi-team event tournament at the Battle for Atlantis. But that's just my thoughts.
No, that's fair. And that's fair as a former player, and it's fair as a sports fan, an observer of the sports. As governor of the state, to call for an investigation and to make up a banner that says the NCAA stands for National Corrupt Athletic Association, to me, that's ridiculous grandstanding. And I would also say this to you and to others, and you're certainly entitled to your opinion on this, and whether you were a former player or not. 68 teams, win more games and get in. That's the way I look at it. And my son went to Indiana, and I think Indiana could make as much of a case to be in as West Virginia, but Indiana is a blue blood basketball program. They've won 5 national championships. North Carolina, the same thing. I think North Carolina in the play-in game looks bad anyway. I don't think they should be there as well.
I feel like the playing game was more of the safety, as like, okay, we didn't give them the whole. They have to earn it still.
Okay, but
that's
still
more of like a gift.
Yeah,
in that sense.
But to me, North Carolina should not be schlepping to Dayton to play on True TV on a weeknight. Yeah, that's just what. But for the governor to put his foot into this and act like this was a crime against humanity for his basketball team to be left out, no, I'm not going to do. I think that's absolutely absurd. But I appreciate your opinion on that, and I understand how you and others feel. Give me a sense of the what you think is going on the West Virginia campus, having been a student there.
And as a student, being at WVU, I can only imagine that it's a lot of heartbreak. And when I was there as a manager, like West Virginia always had this mentality that's like West Virginia against the world.
Mm-hmm.
And for the first time in the basketball program, it was really West Virginia against the world. It felt like it's like, oh, we always say it as a saying, but now it's like really shown. Like I've seen former players, use Huggs' quotes or Beeline's quotes in tweets saying like, "Oh my gosh, this is madness." Like Bob Huggins had a famous quote in practice when he was upset. It's sickening. So that's been kind of going around with my Country Roads family and also with the student body that it's sickening that this is not going our way.
And if I was a student there, I'd probably be pretty upset about this. But here's how the landscape has changed. 1970. When they only had 25 teams, Marquette got in. Al McGuire was the coach. He didn't like the seeding, where he was going or who he was playing against, and he said, "We're turning it down, and we're going to play in the NIT." The NIT. I don't even know if he won that year, but that's how things were different then. And Maryland, which did not win the tournament in the first year of McMillan and Elmore, the 2 big recruits that Lefty had in 1972, they went to the NIT and they won it, which was kind of a statement. And Lefty said, "Well, we're the second best team in the country because we're the only other ones that won our last game." So okay, the next year they get in. And the only reason they got in was because NC State had cheated to get David Thompson. And they got beat in the second round. That's when they only had, 1973, they only had 25 teams. They lost to Ernie D. Gregorio and Providence. And then the game and they made a documentary about it, which I need to see. 1974, the famous overtime loss to NC State in the ACC final when only the conference tournament champ went. And North Carolina State went on to win the NCAA championship. Maryland went home. They didn't play in the NIT. And that's when things started to change. They went to 32 the next year, and then eventually 64, and now 68. And when it gets to 76, you can be damn sure that there will be somebody carping about the fact that they got left out, right? I mean,
right.
It's inevitable.
It's
right?
inevitable for that.
Yeah. So that's all part of the picture. So when I hear a governor complaining with my background, watching my favorite college basketball team over the years, I have to step back and say, there was a time when the number 3 team in the country, I think they were ranked 3. NC State was 2, UCLA was 1. They were 3, and they went home. And I think even at the end of the season, without playing in the NCAA tournament, they were ranked 5 in the country. So it's a different world, and I just can't get too worked up about a team that was left out of a field of 68. Anyway, that's a wrap for me. Thanks to Vanessa Blair-Lewis, the coach of George Mason. She's got them in the NCAA tournament for the first time in school history. Thanks to Isaac Kuhn-Harris for running the show. All of you listen. Bram is next. I'll see you tomorrow at 9 a.m.